I am Councilor Green, standing in for Councilor Gethers, joined by Councilor Monto, Councilor Peniagua, Council President Hudson, Councilor Allen, Councilor Schultz, and Councilor Hogan. So I'll turn it over to you, Corey.
Great. Thank you, councilors, and thanks for the opportunity to talk to you about this proposed pilot. I am Corey Dunham. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the city, and with me is my colleague,
Commissioner Robinson over DBW.
Okay. And we also have First Deputy Commissioner Ann Fordock. We have Connor Muldoon, who is the Deputy Director of the Office of Accountability, Performance, and Innovation. We have Luann Meyer from Barton and LaJudas. We have Rich DeVesti from the Director of Fleet Operations, and Kelly and Frank, you know the rest of them. Good to see you. Thanks for coming. Okay, so just to give a quick overview. So we're going to just really quickly go through kind of the background of how we got to this point, give an overview of the proposed pilot, some considerations, hopefully answer some questions, address some concerns, kind of our next steps, and then I want to make sure that we leave plenty of time for questions. Okay, so just as a background, as many councilors know, we embarked on a study last year to take a look at our current sanitation operations. We engaged with Barton and LaJudas through a competitive process, selected them, and we shared the study. We had a committee meeting about the study as well. And Barton and LaJudas had staff that obviously spoke with Commissioner Robinson, Deputy Commissioner Fordock, followed our crews in the field to see how it worked in live action. Some of the observations that they made, which I think many of you are familiar with, primarily I think the headline was really the safety concerns for our collection workers. What the type of work that they engage in, some of the practices that they engage in was of great concern to the administration, and also reinforced by the observations made by Barton and LaJudas. Other concerns, observations that they made, set out limits are not followed. As many folks know, it's kind of been an evolution over time that folks just put out whatever on the curb, and a couple days later it disappears. And so that kind of encourages that behavior. We have ordinances on the books. Historically, they haven't really been consistently enforced, and so set out limits are not necessarily followed consistently throughout the city, and honestly with some of our workforce as well. I think in an effort to keep the city clean, they'll just pick up whatever because they don't want to leave it at the curb, but that really kind of is not a best practice and encourages some bad habits on both sides. Excessive litter, the containers that we have, particularly recycling containers, are really not sufficient. And as we experienced earlier this year, if there are any delays in pickup, if we have a windy day, trash and recycling is blowing all over the neighborhood. A low recycling rate, uneven collection routes. If you look at our routes, it's really all over the board in terms of the number of stops per route. So recommendations, the primary one was moving to wheeled carts, which is what brings us here today. I just want to emphasize this pilot is really a trash cart pilot. That is what we are piloting. The recommendation is that we would have one cart for trash and one for recycling. The suggestion is also semi-automated collection vehicles, which really speaks to the worker safety. These workers are, 200 to 300 times a day, probably more than that, lifting 50-pound trash cans over and over again, and it's really doing a lot of damage to them physically. And so to have semi-automation relieves some of that lifting and straining that they engage in now. Modifying the ordinance, which I know Councilor Green, we've engaged on that conversation before. Don't worry, I'm not bringing that up today, about modifying our ordinance to really take a look at how we define who is receiving this DPW service. Right now, we collect up to 10 units. If an apartment building has 10 units, we're picking up their trash. And then also the exploration of replacing a property tax with environmental service fee. So that was just one of the recommendations and options they laid out.
You said replacing the property tax.
So instead of having it be funded through a property tax, having it funded through a separate fee.
Okay, so you're not replacing the property
Yeah,
tax.
so I guess replace funding by property taxes with a separate fee, so, yeah. Behind the back works better? It's only 2022. Okay. So taking up the recommendations that were laid out there, what we are looking to do with the pilot is test a semi-automated pickup and covered trash carts. This is driven by worker safety. And I have some stats that are in the handout, and also we can go over at the end that look at our workers' comp claims for sanitation, which are beyond any other department, really, especially when you look at injuries due to straining and lifting. And I know the auditor did an audit last year that also provided this data. Sanitation is really just off the charts in terms of workers' comp, which obviously, there is a cost associated with that, but equally important is just the damage it's doing to folks' bodies. And as Frank has pointed out previously, and the studies draw this out, the reviews of people that look at our workers' comp, they're also open workers' comp claims. So that means there's just chronic issues again and again with our employees. So, yeah.
Do you know how many people are actually out of work on workers' comp now?
I mean, it fluctuates. I don't know, Jeremy, if you know, or Ann off the top of your head. I mean, the thing too is that there's only between 80 and 90 total employees in sanitation. And so when you compare them to the police department, the fire department, I mean, the fact that 80 to 90 people are generating that many workers' comp claims and the associated cost compared to larger departments like the fire department and the police department, we have an issue with safety.
But Corey,
Yes.
I mean, I imagine there's been comparisons to other municipalities that have a similar
Yeah, I mean, I think
station.
it's...
So, I mean, comparing them, it's apples and oranges, comparing them to police and anybody else.
Right, I
Because
guess...
they do a specific thing, repetitive thing all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm looking at, as an employer, what we are subjecting our employees to and the types of injuries we're subjecting ourselves to. Obviously, police work is completely different than sanitation work. You'll find that, workers' comp cases involving motor vehicles for police is completely different than sanitation, because sanitation doesn't spend a lot of time driving around in motor vehicles. So, I mean...
You haven't done a comparison between another municipality?
No, I mean, but I mean,
like a similar operation?
Yeah, I think you'll find across the industry, sanitation is top 10 of some of the most dangerous professions. Sure. And a lot of that is top number 5, is due to the strain, obviously also they're dealing with traffic and things of that nature, but also it's just the strain that it's putting on people's bodies to provide the service.
And I'm just gonna piggyback on Councilor Hogan, because you said it's in the top 5, and I'm gonna say this. We're not gonna talk about just now this administration. Let's go backwards, okay? So if we knew from the beginning that this was such an issue, what did we do as far as training? What did we do to ensure that there was gonna be, like, bringing in the trainers to talk about ergonomics and how to lift and all that good stuff? So
So I mean, I think, and Rick was before the council earlier to talk about equipment operators, because trainers, because their HR is working to enhance their work safety profile and the staff that's dedicated to workplace safety. So I can't speak historically what previous administrations have done, but I know for our administration, we are committed to workplace safety. But I think at the same time, I don't know that there's any way to lift as much as these workers lift hundreds of times a day without doing damage to their body. You can lift with your legs all you want. You're lifting 50 plus pounds 300 times a day, and you're lifting couches and you're lifting other heavy items.
I've done it for one day. You don't want to do it.
Yeah, I mean,
I get what you're saying, Jeremy, and I get what you're saying, but I came out of a factory. I lifted every day too, a whole bunch of weight. So
Right.
again, there's a way that we were trained
Sure.
when it came to doing this work.
Yeah, I mean, and semi-automation is not the only solution. It's not the silver bullet that will address all of our safety, workplace safety. We also need to deal with, obviously, sanitation workers are going in and out of traffic, and we have some issues in compliance in terms of how they need to be safely doing that. And all of that is really laid out in the review that PMA just recently did of how DPW is operating, specifically sanitation. So, I will say, we are also, as many of you know, not the first municipality to explore this. And so I think if there's a way for us to make the workplace safer for our workers, we want to try and do that as soon as we can, understanding that it's going to take a couple different factors to make it a safer workplace, but this is an important one.
And out of the municipalities that did explore it, how many of them are doing it?
are still doing, I'm not aware of anybody who's moved to carts and moved to semi-automation and then said, you know what, never mind, we're gonna go back to having our staff lift all that trash.
Know who's still doing it, though.
I mean, Rochester does it, Buffalo does it, in terms of upstate cities. I mean, we can get you a list because we've done a lot of research and talking to other municipalities. Yeah, I mean, just in the county, other people use carts and use semi-automation. And so obviously, you know, in addition to creating worker safety, this pilot, we believe, using the carts, using semi-automated pickup will help reduce litter. Again, we saw earlier this year that people are setting things out in bags, they're not in trash bins. The recycling bins are obviously too small for the amount that people are recycling now. And obviously, kind of speaking to that as well, improving the reliability of trash pickup. So, if we don't have as many people out because of workers' comp, if it is a more consistent automated system, then it's going to make it easier for us to deliver that service reliably. So what we're proposing is a two-phase evaluation, really. Phase one is utilizing a subcontractor for a limited 12 to 15-week pilot. That's the first phase of the pilot. And I will say the contract with the private hauler is 1 year. That's what we're proposing to the council. This is not an open-ended contract. The provisions in the RFP that this contractor responded to were very specific. It was, we are providing the service to this many people as part of a pilot, and the contract, it is for 1 year, and it's over at the end of the year. You know, obviously, if we wanted to renew, it would require the council's approval, but the contract we're putting before the council is 1 year.
So can I ask, what's the goal of that 1 year? Is it feasibility? Is it to test whether or not residents can
Yep.
comply with carts?
It's all of those things, and we have that, what's that? Yeah, so I will move through quickly, but the idea of using the subcontractor is to try and learn as many lessons as we can without interrupting our current operation. The whole point is, and the mayor has said this privately and publicly, he'd like to, we want to make this work in-house. We want to use our city workforce. Using a subcontractor for the pilot will let us know how long does it take to do this? What are the residents' response to carts? What's the compliance rate? Without putting that burden of doing this pilot, which it might be a burden, without putting that on our workforce, which we feel, especially since we want to do this as soon as possible. So we want to launch it in January.
Will they be training the workforce too?
So, once we get to that point, what kind of training do they need? We are imagining that if we move to semi-automation, it'd be a driver and one other laborer. Is that enough? We're not going to know those things until we get into the field and start rolling out the carts, get them to the residents, and find out what the deal is. So the second phase is to use city employees. Again, this is a finite agreement with a subcontractor with the intention of learning as many lessons as we can so that when we engage with our city workforce, we're already ahead of the game and not just trying it for the first time with them.
So phase two is after the year or during the year?
So no, we'd like to start it during the year. So at the end of that 12 to 15 weeks, again, barring anything, we don't know what's going to happen once we start doing this, but in our heads, the plan would be to start engaging with our workforce. That also helps us get through the winter when, we've got mechanics focused on keeping plows up. It's obviously difficult enough to pick up trash in the winter. So we'd want to try and engage with our city workforce in the springtime when it's going to be easier for them to do this with all the lessons we've learned.
So Barton and Judas clearly are the experts here, and other municipalities, as you've stated, are using them, and it's great. Why do we have to kind of reinvent the wheel with phase one here to do an outsourcing with waste management to teach us lessons? I mean, why are we so unique, or are we so unique here in Syracuse that they're going to find things that they wouldn't have experienced in Rochester or Albany?
I think that's a good question. The honest answer is we haven't done it before. I don't
Right,
think.
but we technically aren't. The city, if you're contracting, outsourcing with waste management, they are the automated hauler experts.
Right.
So they're gonna know what to do. I could see if your goal for phase one was to teach the community what it's like to use carts, and there's some kind of training in there for the residents, then okay, but.
So it will be. So the benefits. Benefits are creating a safer workplace, test the equipment and carts in Syracuse neighborhoods, assess how the equipment and carts work in winter conditions, ensure that we have enough city mechanics available for plows and other sanitation equipment, and deliver consistent trash and snow removal for city residents. So that's what we see as the benefits of the program.
But before you move, you said that you want to do it to engage with the workers, correct? So before this all took place, did you engage with the workers about this pilot coming up?
So, I mean, we've met with, we've met with organized labor, the folks that represent the workers there, to hear their concerns. Commissioner Robinson and Deputy Commissioner Fordock hear it every day. They understand what we're trying to do, that we're trying to create a better workforce and, a safer workforce for them. Certainly, we're not, we received no significant pushback or anything from the unions, with the understanding that this is a limited pilot. This is a limited period of time, and the lessons that we learn here are going to benefit their members, because we won't be learning those lessons for the first time with our folks.
Okay, because you know my concerns.
I do.
But I want to ask B&L, so in these other municipalities, were there any job losses for automation?
So, yeah, go ahead.
Good afternoon.
Introduce yourself.
Luann Meyer with Barton and LaJudas. So regarding job loss, most of the time those positions are able to be utilized for other needs that we're lacking, potentially litter control. Now that you have carts, you're going to have to be distributing carts more because they're going to need repairs. People need additional carts. They're going to request additional carts. We want staff to be able to address other issues besides just that collection. So you currently have 3 people in a vehicle, right? And that could, if you go to semi-automation, it could go to 2. 3 is a high number to have in a vehicle.
Because I sure hate to be a 5-10-year employee and get a pair of tongs and tell me to go pick up litter off the street when I was driving a truck or throwing trash.
Well, I mean, if somebody's driving, we still need them to drive. I mean, yeah, but a laborer to say, you no longer need to punish your body by lifting those things, those heavy trash cans every day, and instead you're going to deliver carts, you're going to put wheels on carts, you're going to pick up trash,
We're not going to give them no wooden tongs and send them on the streets, right?
There's still a 400 contract. There's still a contract. We still got to abide by the contract.
So the pay rate stays the same?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we are not permitted by contract to lay off all of sanitation and replace them with a private contractor. We're not permitted to do that.
Make a driver a laborer. We can't do that. That's,
And I just want to be clear, like, that is not the focus of this program. Down the road, once we get through the pilot, we can certainly engage on a broader conversation, but the focus of this pilot here is to engage with the subcontractor to minimize the interruption for our workforce and use the information that we gain from that pilot to apply it to the workforce. They've never done this before. Residents have never done it before. And to have everybody doing it for the first time, both residents and our workers, we just think is not ideal. We'd like to try and get somebody who's done it before, get our residents acclimated, and then continue the rollout citywide, engaging with our workforce to do the pickups.
But don't minimize it, though, because the way you're saying it is just about the carts, which is not the truth, because you're going to have a human part to those carts as well.
Right. But I mean,
Not just about the carts.
but this isn't a pilot for privatization. This is a pilot. We're looking to figure out carts and how carts operate, and are our communication efforts successful? Does anybody read the literature that we put out there? Do we need to do more TNT meetings, more neighborhood watch meetings? We're obviously going to do a very robust outreach with neighbors, but we need to know, and we prefer to do it without our workforce, whether or not that worked, so that we can adjust it when we go citywide.
I'm going to remind you again, DPW had $0 in their budget for education, so clearly there is a need for education, and that could potentially help what the issues are that you're raising with
Sure.
compliance and everything else.
Sure, yeah, I mean, so in terms of workplace safety, that's going to be centralized in HR, which is why, Rick was in front of you today about the safety equipment. The communication strategy, we're working closely with the mayor's office, communications team, that office, so that, and with our community ambassadors and with our neighborhood planners, we really want to make sure that if the council approves this, that all we're talking about from now until the end of the year and beyond is we're rolling out these carts. Does everybody understand what that means and who's going to be impacted?
You're gonna be, looking into languages and.
Yes, absolutely.
The community.
Absolutely, and that's where the community ambassadors and the neighborhood planners and the people who are on the ground living in the neighborhoods are going to be so essential to getting the word out.
So why these 5 routes?
So, man, you guys are gonna make me not want to give you PowerPoint presentations in advance anymore. Just rush me along. Okay, so, so these routes. So basically, what we tried to look at is an average route. We didn't want to go to the places where we have really minimal challenges with compliance. But we also didn't want to go to the neighborhoods where we have the greatest amount of compliance. Like, we wanted to try and get down the middle in terms of, yes, some areas we have issues with compliance. We also wanted to minimize, given that we have that conversation waiting for us about the larger unit apartment buildings, we wanted to try and minimize the number of large apartment units that were along the route. But the routes, generally speaking, are pretty even. One day is 528, one day is 534, 537. So we wanted to try and choose routes also that we could find similar routes so that it would be, an even comparison. And then obviously part of this pilot is a public outreach campaign, everywhere we can get the word out there, reaching out to residents who are going to be on the pilot, reaching out to residents who are not going to be on the pilot to explain to them why their brother-in-law down the street got a cart and they didn't get a cart, and to explain to people that this is a multi-year rollout to make sure that we do this right and that people understand what we're doing. It's going to take us some time to do the citywide rollout, first with trash and then with recycling.
So how does the fee roll out?
So there's no fee. With residents, there's no fee. No. So these are the routes. There's the Monday route, and I won't call out which counselor will be interested in which because I might get it wrong. But obviously there's a corridor along Court Street with those streets. Tuesday, Durston, Dorchester, Brattle, Grant Boulevard, James Street.
Both are District 1, by the way.
What's that?
Both are First District.
Well, then
Feel special.
you will be a key ambassador of getting information out there.
I'm excited about that.
Wednesday, it's a lot of Outer Comstock, Goodrich, Jamesville, Lorraine, Hughes Place.
So can I ask, where are you having the most trouble with compliance now? And I don't want to pick on a neighbor.
Yeah, I don't want to call out any neighbor.
Neither
I
do
mean,
I,
you
but-
can probably anticipate, so I would say, the certain section, anybody who falls on that Monday pickup, we're going to have compliance issues because people go out of town. People, they're not going to be here Sunday, so they set it out Saturday. And so, that's certainly an area where we have compliance issues. Issues where people might be new Americans and aren't familiar with sanitation pickups. There will be some compliance issues there. And so that's why we really need to marry this carts with a very robust education plan so that folks understand, even if your pickup day is Monday, you're not supposed to set it out Friday before you go out of town. You're supposed to set it out Sunday night, Monday morning. And then also, obviously, reaching our new American population or other folks that for one reason or other just are not familiar with what the expectations are for residents. So Thursday, there was the route in the Valley, Oakley, portions of South Salina Street. And then the Friday route, Avery, Milton, Driscoll Ave, no relation. Gear, Hayden, Willis. So those are the proposed routes. And, this is the first time we are sharing that information publicly, so we haven't communicated with neighbors yet because this is just the beginning of the conversation. Oh, I hit the wrong thing. There we go. Okay. So the pilot program overview. So we issued an RFP. We selected Waste Management as they were the lowest bidder. Information there of comparing the unit cost to the cities. And, in part why also to use a subcontractor. Waste Management has been doing this for a long time. And so to have somebody experienced to meet the inexperience of the residents who haven't done this before, we think is going to be much more successful. They have the onboard computing system capabilities. They're going to be able to collect a lot of data that we're going to be able to benefit from when we roll this out. So we'd be meeting with them on a regular basis to assess how things are going. But again, the contract is for 1 year. So there are all the things there: route sequence, weight of every load, missed pickup tracking, all those things that we're not in the place yet to collect that information. And Waste Management has. They've been doing this for a very long time.
So what Waste Management has been doing is working with very compliant residents who know how to use the carts, who've been doing it for years.
Mm-hmm.
Do they have that specialized expertise to go into a neighborhood that's never had carts and doesn't know how to use them yet and still has their old cans out?
I would imagine Waste Management has worked with communities where it's brand new to them. Not new to you guys, but brand new to the residents that you're working with. Yes.
So what's that learning curve look like as far as
Patrick, you want to
compliance?
come up and introduce yourself?
Patrick Martino with Waste Management. To answer your first question, yes, very common for us to have brand new rollouts where for a particular community, going to a cart-based system is brand new to the residents.
Areas include, just give us an idea of what you're talking about here locally.
Here locally, so we do a lot of work, Rochester Way, Buffalo Way, town of Lancaster in Buffalo Way, 16,500 parcels, all converted at once a couple of years ago. It's usually I'd say a 4 to 5 week period, because every week is an education point. Right? When you roll something out, they're touched by the service every week, right? So that presents an opportunity on that weekly basis to help educate the residents, whether it's through educational materials or point of service education, where we're leaving them a tag saying your cart was too close to a tree or too close to a mailbox, whatever it might be.
So that town of Lancaster, you said,
Mm-hmm.
is that a urban or a suburban area?
It is a first ring suburb.
But you work with Rochester and Buffalo.
Yep. That's just one example, right? We work with urban partnerships, rural partnerships. One of the larger ones we have up Providence, Rhode Island. They had gone totes a number of years ago. Went through the same kind of process.
And you were there frontline to bring them through that conversion?
Yes, not myself particular. I cover New York State, but the team I'm part of, yes.
Okay. I'm just worried about the similarities of the populations that you've helped convert to carts. Syracuse is pretty special, and we're very densely populated in some areas. Thankfully, they've picked 2 routes in the first district where we're very densely populated.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to make sure that this team is prepared.
Absolutely, and you are 100% correct that each kind of area, kind of city presents different challenges, right? Density is one, right? There's going to be a lot of cars parked on the road. There's going to be a lot of obstacles in a urban area, and those are things that we are pretty familiar with working with.
That was going to be my concern. Like that is my concern. A lot of cars park on the street, especially on the north side, because a lot of homes don't have driveways. So if I put my trash can out, but a car comes later and parks it right in front of it, how does that work? Do you guys skip it? Is there the person gets out the truck and actually moves the cans?
Yep, there's going to be a fair amount of cart movement in an area like this. Ideally, no, the driver's not getting out and he's using an automated arm. But again, in an urban area, we know that the conditions aren't always perfect for that, right? It's the challenge we work with in an urban area, but one that we do every day.
So what happens when your driver get hurt because he had to go get that can?
The object of this is to limit the number of times he has to get out. We want to try to make the job as safe as possible for our drivers, same as the city's objectives,
I
right?
get that, but what they just said, if it's
So
a
he's
car
not
parked
lifting
there-
the can, though? The driver's not
No,
lifting
no,
the
he's
can.
wheeling it over so the arm has access to it without hitting any objects.
Okay. Cruising right along. So I think we've kind of covered why we think the pilot is necessary. We want to make this transition successful, and we want to minimize the interruption to our existing service and our workforce during the winter season. 96-gallon cart, which we can certainly spend time talking about too, that is the industry standard. There are other municipalities who have elderly populations or populations of people with mobility issues, and they are able to do carts successfully. We don't advertise it, but DPW makes those accommodations now with our current staff, so we would do a similar type of consideration for anybody in that position.
So is each house only gonna get one 96-gallon cart?
Correct.
Okay. And then a recycle.
So we're not going to do recycling yet. We want to, this is going to be a brand new service for residents, and we really want to try and do this as quickly as we can for our workforce, but also as deliberately as we can for residents to make sure we're not trying to force too much change on them at once. And so we do the trash cans first, the trash carts first. We, eventually roll those out citywide, and then we would move to recycling. It's also, not as much a concern for residents, but for us, as we look to fund this project, there are funding opportunities available through grant opportunities, and we want the time to be able to make sure we're taking advantage of those opportunities when we're ready to roll out recycling.
So what happens so say you have like a party or a cookout or whatever, like on a weekend, so you have a lot of trash to put out. So your 96-gallon cart is full.
Mm-hmm.
If you put a regular trash can out or just trash bags out, what happens in that
It's the
situation?
same thing you do now. Special pickup, right? You would call and.
Well, they don't call. So that's what I'm saying. Like, are they just gonna stop?
So
and pick it up?
that's part of the pilot is our 96 gallons generally are the standard for other municipalities, seems to work in general. But again, who knows what we're going to find out. If we find out that 96 gallons are not enough for certain neighborhoods, or consistently we've got these people that are putting out more, right now, we're confident that for 99% of the population, 96 gallons is going to be enough. Tim Rudd will tell you differently, because he thinks he's going to need more than 96 gallons. And that's part of the pilot. We'll explore that to see, does 96 gallons meet our need? And if for certain residents it doesn't, then how do we address that?
But if not, the driver or whoever the other person is would just hop out and grab the other bags and just toss them in there, right?
Yeah, I'm not trying to present where, our laborers aren't going to have to labor at all, where they're just gonna, there still is going to be an element of lifting, but it would be significantly less than what they do now.
Does Waste Management have a comment on what happens in that situation? If somebody puts their own personal can out next to the standardized cart? what do you do
Yep,
with it?
so the RFP, as it was put out, was for the contractor to provide service to that cart, right? However, other communities, it's a common thing that comes up in other cart-based communities. There's a few different options. One is allowing residents to purchase a second tote, second cart, putting the financial burden on the people who generate more than the average, right? I think the last study I read, and it's consistent with what I see, one cart generally is adequate for 98 to 99% of the population, right? It's addressing that small other. I always look from it through my own lens of myself with my wife and my 3 kids, what's, probably an average size family, right? And we have 0 issues with it all year long, except for 1 week, Christmas week, right? When you have bags of, wrapping paper or whatever it might be. So in addition to options that I've seen other communities use, the additional tote that then gets added separate, but also extra capacity stickers are what other communities use. So kind of a one-time use fee, for those families like myself that may have 1 extra bag a year, right? They pay a couple bucks and, then that gets added. The way that gets disposed of is if it is a stickered item like that system, that bag would go next to the tote. Driver would tip the tote, put it back down, reload the tote, tip the tote again.
Automatic or
Yeah,
human?
Yeah. The way automated trucks work is the hopper's on top of this may be way too much information.
Bring it on.
But the hopper on the truck is on top. So the driver doesn't have the ability to manually load. You're used to seeing rear load trucks, right? Where it's easy to load in the back. These trucks are designed to be used with an automated arm tipping the totes up top. So that is why the driver tips the tote, puts it down, reloads it, tips it again.
So what does semi-automatic mean with regard to what he just said?
So it would be, a laborer with a driver, that it wouldn't be entirely that nobody ever needs to get out of the truck. I mean, that's how we're imagining semi-automation. Correct? Right. It's not an arm that comes out. It'd be a rear tipper, so someone's got to roll the cart over and then it's tipped in.
And is that what machines or trucks you have, Waste Management, that'll be doing the pilot?
What we would probably be using during the pilot is a fully automated truck with hydraulic sidearm that would be tipping it, as opposed to the semi-automated trucks with the rear tippers.
So not
But
exactly
then if we
the
end up
solution
with the second kind,
for
and then we're gonna be training and
pilot.
looking at assessing, the need with the
The
A
concepts,
instead of
the
B, how does that work?
concepts would be pretty transferable.
I mean,
The concepts of the two will be pretty transferable. Where the trade-off is in a fully automated truck usually utilizes one employee, whereas the semi-automated truck has the additional benefits over manual collection from a safety standpoint, but does require the helper to be helping load that truck.
and that's in part why we see this as a carts pilot. This is to see whether carts will work. We're not trying to do a automation pilot or a truck pilot. It's carts.
Okay, I need you, before you walk away. Let me ask you this question. Helen gets the 96-pound or whatever cart, but instead of just putting trash in, I throw recycle in there. What are you gonna do, tag my whole cart?
If it is observable, I think identifying recyclables that are going in the wrong cart is important. However, as that cart's being dumped, if it's at the bottom, just like if it's at the bottom of a garbage can today, right? You can't notice it until it's too late and already in the hopper.
Yeah, I mean, we don't plan on doing, as part of this pilot, monitoring of people's recycling. I mean, that's going to come through education when we roll out the recycling totes of what's recyclable, what information can we put on the totes to let people know what's recyclable, where can they put items, what's not recyclable, where can they bring those items. So, I mean, we're not looking as part of this pilot to do police recycling materials. That's not, we might get there down the road when we roll out the recycling totes, but that's not part of the pilot.
Give me
for what
something
that's
that
worth.
big, I'm putting everything in.
Well, and that's part of the pilot too is,
Everything
are
going
people just throwing televisions in the 96-gallon
Yep.
can? Like, we need to know
Televisions
that, we need to know
Mattresses.
that, and then we need to figure out how to address that.
Yeah, mattress.
We gonna put a mattress in there?
So that's, there's a ton of education working with Okra that we're going to do when we roll out the recycling carts, but we're not there yet. What's that? Yeah, we already pretty much talked about why a subcontractor, why not recycling. So any other changes to the process? There are, prohibited items that you're not supposed to put in your trash now remain the same. Collection day and time is the same. Assistance to services to people who are elderly or have disabilities remains the same. We will, and we have proposed changes to the ordinance to make sure that there is something in our ordinance that says if the city provides the cart and you want the city to pick up your trash, then you need to use the cart. That's we can't have it be optional for the pilot. That's not going to work. So
the people buy the
we're going to drop them.
how we call it, the cart?
The cart, yeah. They don't have to buy them. We're going to provide them.
Unless you need a second one.
If you need us, we don't know what we're going to experience in the pilot. Do we have a flood of people who are, orchestrated by Tim Rudd saying, I need more than a 96-gallon cart? Or is it really just a handful of people? And then we would obviously work with the council to say, how would you like us to handle? It's just a handful of people. Do we charge them? Do we do, what is being suggested of? We do stickers, so that way if people have more than that, then they, if it's an occasional thing, if it's an everyday thing. These are all the questions that we want to find out.
So logistically, at some point, if we approve this, you'll just, you'll distribute the carts. Now, how's that gonna work? How many carts per,
We're going to drop the carts off at the counselors' homes and then have them
Have us
wheel
do
them
it?
No, we would,
put a
the-
sticker on it, hold it for council?
I hope you have a garage.
Good idea.
We're going to drop about, Counselor Schultz better have a really big garage because we're dropping off like 1,000 carts to her house. No, we would work with the company who is creating the carts, and they would, and they
deliver them?
They can deliver them, yes.
That should be interesting.
It will be, and we're gonna, this is similar to a lot of pilots with
And
sidewalk
if we turn
snow
it down, they
removal.
get to keep the cart, right?
What's that?
If we turn it down, they get to keep the cart.
Well, we still want to move to carts. That's,
They're gonna try to retrieve them?
what's that?
No, they're gonna try to retrieve the carts if we turn the pilot down?
No, we still want to move to carts. Regardless of whether or not, we think this is the best way to execute the pilot, but regardless, one thing that we're sure of is that we want to move the city to carts. So,
But he still didn't answer his question.
what's the question? How, the company is going to deliver them.
They're
What
gonna
else?
deliver them, they're gonna pick them up, right?
Why would they?
We have to vote on this. At the end of the pilot, we're gonna have to vote on whether this is
No, they
okay.
go back and pick them up, is
Yeah.
what he's saying.
Yeah, we already purchased the carts, so we've got them. Do we?
Where do you got them?
What's that?
Where do you have them?
Well, they are on their way. We've put in the purchase order. They haven't yet been delivered, but
Fire engines.
yes, exactly. But there's not as much of a delay. There's some delay, but it's not 900 days like it is with a fire truck. So, we've got them. They belong to us. If, for some reason something happens, we can decide what to do with them. But the purchase order is already in for the carts.
So about your phase one,
Yes.
5 routes,
Uh-huh.
only 5 for the pilot, or are you gonna do
So,
3 sets of 5?
So, that's kind of the initial 12 to 15 week pilot, is to do 5 routes. And then, obviously in full consultation with the council, we decide, okay, do we want to now hand those routes over to our folks now that the neighbors have gotten acclimated, they understand how this works? Do we then hand those over to our city workforce and then ask Waste Management if they'd be willing to go to 5 other routes? Or do we keep Waste Management on those routes and send our folks to other routes? We don't know what we don't know. And until we do the pilot, we don't know, does it make sense to keep them there? Does it make sense to shift them someplace else?
Just from a learning standpoint, I can comment on the first 2 routes, and those are pretty much all owner-occupied, not rentals. So I would like to see phase 1 be that, but phase 2 of phase 1, or part B of
Right.
phase 1, be our Washington Square area, who has
Absolutely.
densely populated
Yeah.
renters that
Yeah.
you can learn from that as well.
Absolutely.
Because you're gonna
Yeah.
get A+ out of the
Yeah.
first 2 routes.
So that's the thing, is that we didn't want to, I think you're absolutely right. When we move to whatever we're going to do next, we're going to want to challenge. We're not going to want to duplicate the routes we already did, because we already learned all the lessons that we need to learn. Let's move into an area where there's a lot of rentals. Let's move into an area where the topography is different. Let's move into an area where, the parking regulations are different, or we have issues with compliance, or, absolutely. We don't want to just continue to do all heavily owner-occupied routes. That's not really a pilot.
And you think 3 months and a half will give you enough time to collect all the data?
I think to at least get us started and to see what lessons we learned that then we can apply, in the hope would be that in that time frame, then we start to test it out with our own workforce. And so we think in that period of time, that should be sufficient. I can imagine what you guys are looking at.
I'm sorry, Corey.
That's okay.
Corey, I'm sorry. So Rich is all set with the arms, if we have to do the arms, right, Rich?
We have the
For
truck.
all you'd have to bring all the trucks in, do the
The
arms.
truck that
and
we
all
purchased, the new trucks that we purchased have come with the arms. We've taken them off because we don't need them right now.
We kid around about the carts, but if we ever did this, that would be a tremendous logistical challenge, getting those
Yes.
carts out to everybody.
And so,
Pre-post education and
yeah,
everything else.
absolutely. I mean, and that's what the pilot will show us, is that, wow, we're not going to go from 6 months of, 2 different neighborhoods and then roll it out citywide. We might learn that that's going to be way too much of a challenge. We need to roll it out by quadrant. We need to roll it out by neighborhood. We need to roll it by TNT area. We're not going to know that until we see the reaction from the pilot.
If I could ask Mr. Waste Management, if we were.
Patrick.
No, his name is Patrick.
His middle name is Waste Management, I think.
But I mean, how durable are the carts? And I'm just wondering if there, Rich, if there's any mechanical challenges you see with the attachment and the arms and all that stuff. Because I hate to see something logistically that's going to be a mechanical challenge
Yeah.
when we already have issues with our trucks.
On snow and winter
The-
and
the-
all that.
You wouldn't have those mechanical.
Well, with
that-
the arms is a new thing.
So so that's part of why we want to use Waste Management in the beginning, because we don't have the mechanics right now in place to address the issues that we might face if we started to do it in-house. But we think by the springtime, we just reached an agreement with Local 400 to increase the increase the wages for mechanics. We've got, the safety elements coming in from HR. We are confident that we should be in a better place in the springtime when by the time we're ready to roll this out with our city workforce, that we hopefully we'll be in a better place with our mechanics to address those types of issues. But that's in part also why we wanted to work with Waste Management for the first few months, because we don't think that we're going to have the mechanics in place. Plus, those mechanics are going to be focused on snowplows.
I think we know.
So working with Waste Management, is it gonna be Waste Management and one of our workers? Or is it just all Waste Management? What are we gonna learn from that?
So the pilot right now, the first 12 to 15 weeks would be all Waste Management. They would be doing these routes.
But someone would oversee them.
Yeah, someone would oversee them.
Right, I hear the overseeing, but our city workers won't be able to learn if they're not actually doing it with them.
That's the next phase. That's what we're saying. That's the phase.
That's
We're
what
just
I
trying to
asked
make sure that,
Yeah.
like she said, that carts work in the city. It's pretty much.
But we
keep
know they
focused on
work, but
carts.
we know they work in Albany and Rochester. Why are we different?
Exactly. Why are we different? That's the reason why we're doing it. We're doing it to see if we are different. What difference do the hills, the small streets, the
Well, you didn't select too many hills.
no, but that's
No,
the
but that's
point
just
of
the
us-
first, I mean, it's just
That's for sure.
this is just the first phase of the pilot. I mean,
We wanna make
we're not
sure
going to be able to avoid hills forever. I mean, yeah, we're going to have to get into some hilly areas.
It's like Alabama opened up against Wagner. You want to make.
Well, I mean,
And we're not trying to give you a hard time.
No, it's-
We're just,
yeah.
asking questions.
Absolutely.
Because, I mean, from the beginning, my whole concern is privatizing our workforce, and I'm not really with all of that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So I've said that from the very beginning.
Yep.
So,
yeah, and that's, I mean, and just to be clear, that's not what we're trying to do with this pilot. What we are trying to do is take advantage of somebody who has done it before, and have them meet our residents where they are, where they've never done it before, take those lessons and apply it to our workforce.
So just to build off Council President Hudson, so I'm personally total agreement with the carts. I think it's beneficial and we want to do that. I do think there's two components of this. One is the carts and one is the privatization. And I do think if you ask the city employees or you ask the residents who are going to have their trash picked up by Waste Management, they're not going to say it's a pilot of the carts. They're going to say it's a pilot of
Sure.
privatization.
Yeah,
right?
I can understand them feeling that way. That's not, if we wanted to, this is for 1 year. It's a very narrow scope. If we ever decided how, the decision of how we're going to staff this is going to be made in the open with the administration, leadership at DPW, the council, our organized labor. It's how we end up staffing this in the long run will be a conversation we all have. I'm just trying to say that's not the conversation we're having today. Today, we're trying to talk about leveraging expertise that already exists to roll out carts to our residents who have never used them before.
But I do think we have to view it as part of that conversation, right? That you're privatizing this part of it. And I think in a scenario where it was cheaper to use a private company than us, then it would be a values judgment we have to decide. In this case, it's more expensive. The data collection is not going to be firsthand, right? So it's not going to be our employees that are trained on it. It's not going to be our employees learn how to use the equipment. So yes, there'll be valuable data, but it will be less valuable than if we did it ourselves. And thirdly, it's
disagree.
different trucks, right? So it's a slightly different thing. So I do think, to me, that's the issue I'm having is carts, totally, let's go and do it. But I'm having a little trouble seeing why in this proposal, we wouldn't do it ourselves instead of privatizing it.
Exactly.
So I mean, I disagree. Go ahead.
A million things why. We don't have the staff to keep up with the carts right now, currently. We don't have the manpower. I sat up in front of you probably a couple months ago and told you that we didn't have mechanics. We still don't have mechanics. We have 5. That means when you call me and say, hey, can you plow whatever street? And I say no because we have 14 trucks down because we only have 2 mechanics in. That's tough.
So we're not comfortable rolling out carts until winter is through. And we want to try and make, again, this is about worker safety. We want to try and make the workplace as safe as we can, as soon as we can. And so Waste Management is ready to start working with us in January. We're not in a position to do this with our city workforce any sooner than that, which means we're not going to be doing anything to advance carts until the springtime. And we want to get this started. Again, you know, we want to make the work environment for our workers as safe as we can. And by delaying and not allowing us to use a subcontractor, it's just going to delay that even further. Whereas we use the downtime when our folks are focused on snowplows to squeeze as much information as we can out of the experience with Waste Management. You know, we don't have the equipment on our trucks to collect the same type of data that Waste Management has. Our staff is not used to doing this, and so we're going to be taking on a lot at one time. This is a 1-year contract. With
a 4-year potential renewal.
Which we'd have to come before the council. We'd have to go, if the council says no, I mean, I'm not even sure we would pursue that, but if we did, it would have to come through the council, and the council could absolutely, is fully within their right to say no. It's a 1-year contract. It's a finite group of people. There's no opportunity to say, and if we want to just go citywide, can we do that? I mean, that's not an option. This is the contract that we're coming before you. It's 1 year. It's a set period of time with a set period of responsibilities.
And as
1
you
year.
said before, our workers will be engaged during that 1 year.
Yes. I mean, the regular meetings that we'll be having with Waste Management, it only makes sense for us to have Ken Thomas, who's the superintendent of waste collection, on there, to have some of the crew leaders in there so that we can start that learning process now from somebody who already does it, to say, hey, we've got an issue on Oakley Drive because it's a very steep hill, and you know, how do you guys normally work? I mean, it's a collaborative partnership here. And again, you know, the conversation about privatization is one that we can have if the council wants to have it, but it's not what we're trying to talk about today, because that's not the focus of the pilot.
So this says 12 to 15 week pilot, and you're saying 1 year. So how does 12 to 15 week?
We would evaluate after 12 to 15 weeks. We'd
So you're
come
gonna
before
take
the council
8
and
months
say,
to evaluate.
no, we'd come before the council and say, you know, here are the results and here's what we'd like to do next. I mean, we've got them on contract for a year. No company was going to sign a contract with us for a pilot for less than a year, which probably accounts for the higher cost because it's a short-term contract. If we put out an RFP that we're looking for a 7-year contract, I'm sure the per unit price would have gone down, but we didn't. We said we want 1 year, and that's the least amount of time anybody is going to work with us. So we come back to the council after 15 weeks and say, here are all the things we found out, and here's what our workforce is telling us. And next, we'd like to move to an area, we'd like to send Waste Management to an area that has more non-owner occupied properties.
Which means rolling out new carts, which means educating
yeah.
those people who didn't have the carts before.
Right.
And so what's the waste management contract look like then? You said they would only do a minimum of 1 year. And here we have 12 to 15 weeks that these trucks are rolling on our streets.
Right, that
So
would
what do they
be-
do for the other months?
Yeah,
Just sit
that-
and wait for orders?
No, we would come before the council based on our experience of meeting with Waste Management over the 12 to 15 weeks to say, look, we've met with them, and actually, I don't know, we had a delay in the carts, or there was a massive snowstorm, or something happened where we'd actually like to make it 18 weeks now. It still means we're only on contract with them for a year. And then at that 18 weeks, we have a committee meeting and we present to you our findings, and we say, and now we're ready to bring in our workforce to do this work, and we're going to ask Waste Management to go to areas that are primarily non-owner occupied or hillier areas, and work with the council here. We're not looking to do anything in secret, but to say, well, what's the first phase of the pilot? The first phase we think is 12 to 15 weeks, enough for us to gather some data to figure out, are we just like every other municipality, or are there some things that are unique to Syracuse that we need to learn those lessons when we apply it to the city workforce.
So while we're paying Waste Management for that year, we're also paying Barton and Judas for a 2-year consulting leadership, right? So,
Barton and Judas have been essential to this program. I
Right.
mean, and they're going to be going forward, applying for grant applications for recycling. There's so much more work that needs to be done, even beyond just this pilot.
And during that year, will you be adding,
That would be the goal. Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody imagines that we're only going to stay in those 5 neighborhoods for the entire year. That doesn't make any sense. The pilot is these 5 routes, and then at the end of the pilot, we talk to the council, we talk to the neighbors, we talk to our workforce, we talk to Waste Management and say, okay, what do we think we should do next? We think we should move to other neighborhoods and hand those neighborhoods who are used to using carts now off to our own city workforce to try it out. Now that winter is done, mechanics aren't trying to keep snowplows up and running, we can dedicate some resources to if the arms break or whatever it is. But that's the goal, is to try and move throughout the city over the next year.
Is that anticipated, that the arms is going to be a big strain on the mechanics, that they're going to break frequently, and that's the reason we can't do it
I
ourselves?
mean, we don't know. I mean,
That's you think about it, though. If we have a truck and everything's working but the arm, we still can't use it because everyone's at cart. So that's the biggest part. It's like,
Right.
I'm not saying that
I'm
it's going to
just-
break. We're just anticipating that, little things like that break on trucks.
So that's why I asked, how big an issue is that?
Right.
What's the record of those arms breaking
Right.
and all that stuff? Are we
I mean,
creating more problems?
Right.
with-
Yeah, I mean, it also probably depends on the user, and so that's why training of our staff is going to be essential, so that they know how to use these arms as well.
Aren't all the new trucks we're buying capable of having the arms on them?
Mm-hmm.
So we could theoretically have more trucks than we need, have arms on them in case one were to go down. And
Well, I mean, we wouldn't have like spare trucks because all of our packers would be out on the road.
Right, but we'd have more trucks that are capable of being the pilot truck if we needed to.
Yeah, but then we'd have to take,
different truck, remember, they're rear tippers and they're over the top.
Then what Waste
Right.
Management's doing.
yeah.
Yep. I'm
But
saying
we'd have
for
to,
themselves.
we'd have to take trucks offline in order to make that happen and dedicate mechanics resources to doing that.
In trucks to that pilot.
Yeah.
I just have one logistical question, right? Because you talked about moving forward, how you would talk to the superintendents and the crew leaders. So I'm a people person. So the real people that's gonna actually do the work, when do they get brought into this loop?
I mean,
Or does the crew leader just tell them, this is what you do?
No, we'd be engaging with our workforce, Jeremy and Ann have had meetings with the workforce before, so we would just, I mean, we'd have to work out with the union if we hand off the route that Waste Management does to our own workforce, how does that determined? Is that a volunteer basis? Is it by reverse seniority? We'd have to work with the union to make this work, to figure out, once we start rolling this out with our own workforce, given that it's going to be one route at a time, how do we determine who's assigned to that route?
Just Sandy Koufax curveball here. When you're going to use those sanitation guys, you're going to use them in snow and ice probably if you replace this, right? Or
I'm confused. What did you say?
no, I said you're going to use those sanitation guys that are normally on the routes doing something else, correct?
Oh, yeah, most definitely.
Now, will they have to transfer, because the only residency exempt division
there's-
is sanitation?
It's
so
not
how are
lack
you
of
gonna
work
handle
in
that?
sanitation
Yeah,
as it speaks.
So, I mean, yeah,
You talk about working with the unions.
Yeah, if we get to semi-automation, where we don't need as many people actually in the truck, what we're talking about is trying to broaden the view of sanitation. That sanitation is not just your weekly trash pickup, it's keeping the city clean. So, those folks are still assigned to sanitation, but they're picking up illegal setouts, they're picking up tires, they're helping Andy Jacobowski's crew to try and keep the city clean. They're doing litter pickup, to try and move beyond just sanitation is your weekly trash pickup. It's really broader than that. It's, as Luann said, dedicating those resources to other needs that we're just not meeting right now.
I would suggest broadening the view of that to include the mechanics then, so we get more mechanics for Commissioner Robinson as far as the residents.
Well, we just gave them a
Make them
big,
sanitation.
we just gave them a big wage increase, so hopefully we'll attract more people to be mechanics. So just real quick, how will the pilot be evaluated? So we're basically seeing it as, 3 kind of buckets: performance, the carts work, speed of operations. As many of you know, right now sanitation can usually complete their task for the day well in advance of the 8-hour time frame, and we need to know before we start doing this with our workforce, how long does it take to do these routes, so that we can prepare our workforce and have a conversation with the union that says, I know generally speaking, your workforce is generally used to leaving before the 8-hour time frame. They leave when the routes are done, but these routes are going to take longer, and so I want you to prepare workers for that, and let's engage with the workers and talk to them about what that's going to look like. So quality of life, reduction in litter, contamination, how many people are just throwing their recycling bin and TVs in the 96-gallon, that's going to be an issue. The impact on illegal, what's that?
The mattress.
And mattresses, yes. Impact on illegal setouts, worker safety, public safety. Communication is a major part of the pilot. Was our outreach successful? What can we improve before we roll it out citywide? Workforce agreeability to future changes. Logistics, how did this impact other operations? How did this impact Cityline? Neighborhood physical compatibility. There's too many cars on the street. The street is too hilly. What are we going to do?
I mean, in essence, Corey.
Yeah.
This $577,000, if we voted for it, we're not going to just work, we're not going to say 15 weeks and go away, waste management. We're gonna use it.
We've got,
So it's a year long, we're not going to.
right. So I guess phase one of the year-long pilot with waste management is 12 to 15 weeks, where I anticipate coming back to you with the results of what we've learned in that 12 to 15 weeks and collectively deciding what we do next. There is no way that waste management or Syracuse haulers or anybody out there was going to agree to a contract with the city for 12 weeks.
Right,
Nobody's going to do that. And so, the commitment that we've made to them is that we will work with them for a year, but
we're going to,
But given their experience in Rochester and Buffalo and, the fact that we don't know what's going to happen in the 12 to 15 weeks, let's leverage that experience for an entire year, and then we roll it out with our own staff and we say, thank you very much. So just moving forward the schedule, so obviously education and outreach is ongoing. I just had a meeting with the neighborhood planners and MBD yesterday to start talking about this with our community ambassadors. So the trash cart pilot rollout would be, end of this year into through the second quarter of next year. Modifying the ordinances, we'll come back to. So, the modifying the ordinances with the pilots is already legislation we've submitted, but any other changes we want to make to the ordinance, obviously, we would engage with the council. Routing technology, looking at the recycling cart pilot rollout, citywide trash rollout, hopefully with new routes using some of the route optimization that the council previously approved, going through next year, and then in 2024 looking at the recycling cart rollout. So again, why is it important? A safer, healthier work environment, leveraging resources and knowledge and experience that's available to us now, better service for residents, a better understanding of what's allowed and what's not permitted, and a smarter, hopefully, and a cleaner city. So that's why we think the pilot is important. Here are just some numbers for folks to look at in terms of workers' comp. This is a recent review that PMA did of our departments, and I think it's pretty clear that in terms of workplace safety, sanitation's at the top of the list. With only 80 to 85 people in it. If you look at that strain number, 167 versus police and 74. Questions?
Any other questions?
No.
Okay.
Are you gonna write up like the full plan and share it with us, or is this all we're getting?
No, yeah, I'd be happy to provide what other additional information,
Start
if
date,
it's.
end date.
Yeah, start date, end date.
Everything you verbalized today.
Yeah, absolutely,
Because we're gonna get all kinds of questions from constituents with, how is this gonna happen?
absolutely.
Versed in what that.
Yeah,
looks
no,
like.
we want to make sure we're equipping counselors and, other leaders in the community that people are going to turn to with questions, that we're equipping you with the information you need to answer people's questions.
I want to see one of those 96-gallon cans in here.
I was
There you
going
go.
to roll one in, but I leave the props to Rich Pachelski, so I guess I should have brought mine in.
Rich, you failed us. Where's the cart? We just needed you for the cart.
You didn't say how you're going to handle mattresses, couches, reclining chairs, half a dozen tires. How is these trucks gonna pick that stuff up?
Yeah, so those are.
Thank you, Rich.
So I mean, that's part of the ordinance changes that we need to make. And so, you know, we need to talk about how do we address bulk pickups. You know, right now, there's a limit to how many you're supposed to set out, but, you know, to be totally honest, our record tracking of that leaves something to be desired. So, you know, right now, nothing else would change. It's really just rolling out the carts. And then in the coming year, we can, you know, I mean, I hope it's less than that, but we can talk about, these are the ordinance changes that we want to make in terms of illegal setouts. But it would be great, as you know, Commissioner Robinson and I said before, to dedicate more staff to picking up couches and recliners and all of those things to have, if we are a place where we reduce the number of people that are actually on the truck, then we can dedicate more people to picking up mattresses and keeping track of bulk setouts.
With an arm or by themselves? I mean,
Right.
with their own bodies?
Yeah, I mean,
Those
you
are-
know.
Those are heavier than trash bags.
Right. I mean, go ahead, Jeremy.
We do that now, but, you know.
Right, but you're injured and you've got workman's comp
Well,
out,
that's
so.
why. So what I'm saying is, if we go out and we know we have a bulk pickup, we'll send more staff. When you're doing trash cans, it's only one person lifting and picking up those trash cans. That's why they get injured. It's like football. You tackle together, you most likely gonna get the person down. Tackle separate, I could probably get around, or you can get around me.
We do get that, but I'm on that same question. When you put out mattresses and couches and stuff like that, that's gonna be manual lifting.
Right, but you would have a crew dedicated to that instead of one, I'm gonna say guy, because they're all guys right now, one guy lifting.
No, there's not.
There's what, that's not true?
No, that's not what you.
Oh, that's great.
We got women.
Oh, terrific. But you would have a crew dedicated to that. You know, Andy Jacobowski and his team that goes out there, they have a crew out there so that when they address, you know, dumping and all that, they've got a plan of how to attack it. And so to have a crew dedicated to that would be a lot better than one guy lifting a lazy boy by himself trying to get it into the packer, which is how it operates right now.
Better yet, we have one crew that do that now. Imagine if we have 10 or 15 or 20.
Or imagine if you added yard waste, extra runs there, and those big, huge bucket loaders that you're scooping up little
There you
tiny
go.
bags of yard waste. You could
Yeah.
be scooping up couches.
Yeah. There's a whole bunch of different ways we can address bulk setouts.
I mean, I would venture to guess you're gonna get very different data from other routes than these
Yep.
5.
Yep.
Because these 5 are, there's not a lot of rentals on here.
Right.
And if you look at I'll use Eastwood, we have half of the housing stock is multifamily units.
Yeah.
They're non-compliant because they're moving in, they're moving out, they're transient, and sometimes they just don't care.
Yeah, I mean, and this was just a first shot at routes. You know, if you know, I can put it out there that, like, if we want to engage on, if the routes is kind of the holdup, you know, we can engage on what the routes look like and how to try and craft routes, select from the existing routes that might address more of the needs. But I think the idea was to try and not take on a route that's all non-owner occupied all at once, to try and, you know, pick kind of a middle of the road route with the full intention of, you know, facing new challenges, whichever route we choose next. You know, we didn't have, you know, we have some areas in Tip Hill, but we don't have Tennyson Ave on there because that's a very narrow street. It's a one-way, and we're going to have to figure out, you know, how to address that, you know.
Do the hard ones first.
Exactly.
I guess. I mean, I think we'd like to, you know, roll it out so that there is.
Learn how to use the truck.
Yeah, I mean, and so that, yeah, the education and all that people are, you know, these residents might be a bit easier to reach, and then we can learn from those lessons and apply it to those populations that might be more difficult to reach.
Of those 5 maps, how many units, is that what a house is called, a unit, a stop, are there?
So there is, on the Monday route is 528. On the Tuesday route is 534. The Wednesday route is 537. The Thursday route is 577. And the Friday route is 439, you know, because Fridays are just generally lighter. But I mean, this also goes into you know, another part of this that we're working on is route optimization and trying to figure out, I mean, because these routes have been these routes for as long as anybody can remember. And the density of the city has changed, the makeup of the city has changed, and so we need to make sure that the routes, also for our workforce, because you've got people who are taking on heavier routes, and we want to make sure that it's much more even.
Last question, what
Yeah.
percentage of the city do those 5 routes cover? You just gave me the wrong numbers, but
Yeah, so there's 15 trash routes basically each day, and this is one trash route per day.
got it.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We'll close it.
Okay, we closing it, but I have an off question, because you talking about if they have to use the mechanics, you don't wanna, didn't we just buy new, plows? Didn't we just get new trucks?
Did we approve them?
New plow, new sanitation truck?
New plow trucks, new plows. Didn't we just purchase plows?
Yeah, but those, they get run 24/7, things happen, you know, things happen. I wish you had the magic wand to say, no truck could go down and we'll be great, but.
No, because the way you're saying it is like, I mean, we shouldn't have that much of maintenance, because
Well, I mean, it's also yeah, I
it was
mean,
10, we did 10 trucks, right?
yes,
10,
yeah,
12 to be exact.
yeah. I mean, I'm hoping
10 at one and then 2 at another.
Yeah, we're hoping that there are less issues, but it's also user-driven, which is where the position that Rick came before you today comes in handy, where an equipment operator, somebody who can train people on how to use these plows so that they're not burning up the clutch or whatever. I'm not going to pretend to know what they do, but, and, you know, and also to that end, one of the first things that we're doing this year is having, you know, because we have a number of new drivers. I think there's 15, 16 new drivers in plow trucks. And trying to do, you know, dry run training. They've been going down to the Sam's Club parking lot and doing kind of an obstacle course so that people are not driving a plow for the first time in the middle of a snowstorm. So, I mean, I'm hoping, you know, with the new trucks that we have less issues, but to Jeremy's point, especially when these things are running 24/7, things are going to happen.
There's no breaks.
Somebody can hit them, they can hit something, you know,
I get that, but the
Yeah.
way you guys are saying it's like, oh, we can't do it that way because we may have to do all this maintenance on these new trucks.
I mean, if we had all 13 mechanics that we have budgeted, then I think it would be less of a concern, but we have
have a concern at all.
4 or 5.
You got 5.
And they're not all working at the same time, so it's really two or 3 per shift,
Are those part-times or full-time?
full-time.
Did we go to BOCES?
So we actually have a meeting with the comms team, I think tomorrow or Monday, to talk about how to promote the fact that, you know, we feel like we have a more competitive wage rate now, and so we need to push that information out there so we can try and get some mechanics in.
NTTS, let's hit them all.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean,
Good plan.
you've got mechanics working for dealerships making 6
Well,
figures,
we're
so.
not gonna say all that. Waste management don't live in the city either.
No, but what I'm saying is the people that's working for me, that's all I can control.
Yeah,
They working for you.
not yet, not yet.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.